Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to our monthly broadcast of NVRA Live. We are having some technical difficulties, so you may not be seeing this live, but thank you for joining us either way. I'm Jacob Smith, NVRA's president. Our guest today is Jessica Hyman from Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. Jessica is the associate director of the Housing Advocacy Program's Fair Housing Project. If you don't already know, April is Fair Housing Month. Did I get that right, Jessica?
You did. Thanks so
Good.
much, Jacob.
You're welcome. The FHP of the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity is a statewide training, outreach, and advocacy program that works with municipal offices, regional and municipal planners, housing developers, business leaders, and the general public to increase housing opportunities for persons in protected classes under fair housing laws and to enhance inclusiveness of communities in Vermont. Fair Housing Project also coordinates thriving communities, statewide collaboration to raise awareness about the economic and social benefits of affordable, inclusive housing. So thank you again, Jessica, for joining us. It's great to have you.
It's my,
Um,
my pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Can you talk about what your role is at the FHP?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, the Fair Housing Project is one of CVOEO's statewide housing advocacy programs. And the CVOEO, the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, has a whole host of programs that address the fundamental issues of racial, social, environmental, and economic justice. We host one of the state's 5 community action agencies and a whole slew of programs. And our and most of CVOEO's programming happens within the 4-county area of Chittenden, Franklin, Grand Isle, and Addison counties. But our statewide housing advocacy programs serve the whole state. And so we have the Vermont Tenants Program, which has a hotline for renters and offers workshops on renters' rights and responsibilities in finding housing. We have the Mobile Home Program, which works with mobile home residents and mobile home communities all over the state. The CARES Housing Voucher Program, which is a shorter-term housing voucher program to help folks who are experiencing homelessness get into stable housing, and of course the Fair Housing Project. So I've been with the Fair Housing Project for just about 4 years now. And what we do is we provide direct consultations for people who are experiencing discrimination in their housing. And so this could be people who experience discrimination or harassment or exclusion when they're looking for housing, when they're looking to rent or buy or finance housing, also when they're living in their homes. And then we also provide workshops and trainings for all the types of people and organizations you mentioned before, for the general public and housing and service providers and other folks. And then we also work with local housing committees and regional planning commissions and statewide organizations to increase the amount of inclusive and affordable housing that's out there. And it's important to note that the Fair Housing Project is an education and outreach program. So we're not an enforcement agency. We work with our partners who do enforcement at the Vermont Human Rights Commission, at HUD, and with Vermont Legal Aid and the Department of Justice too. And so we will, refer people to the enforcement agencies if they need to file a complaint. But the bulk of our work is really education and outreach. And as part of that, we try to address some of the systemic issues that got us to where we are today. These historical patterns of inequity in housing, zoning, and different things that have excluded people from housing opportunity for all these years, and also work to increase the public will for inclusive, affordable housing. We really support the YIMBY attitude, yes in my backyard, as opposed to the NIMBY, no in my backyards. And all of this, all this work we do is from it's from an information sharing and relationship building and skill building perspective. And we really want to make sure that everyone, whatever their role is in the housing system, whether they're renters, buyers, real estate professionals, housing providers, service providers, that everyone understands their rights and responsibilities under the law.
Well, thank you. You touched a little bit on this, and we'll talk more about the YIMBY piece, because you can imagine those of us in the industry are in favor, especially people like me who work in a lot of new construction. You touched a little bit on it, but can you tell us a little bit more about just the background, the how, when, and why this program started, and why
Sure.
it felt so important to do so.
Yeah. So the Fair Housing Project started as a CVOEO program back in, I believe it was 1995. So it's been around for a long time. And the main reason it was to make sure that people had access to information about their fair housing rights and to understand the protections under federal law. Under federal law as passed by the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which we're celebrating this month for Fair Housing Act. There are protections in place based on race, skin color, national origin, religion, sex, and disability and family status. And then states have the ability to add additional protected classes. And here in Vermont, we've added age, receipt of public assistance, sexual orientation, gender identity, and being a victim or survivor of domestic violence or sexual assault or stalking. We also have a wonderful anti-NIMBYism protected class in Vermont, which is a protection against denial of development permitting based on the income of prospective residents. And so a big part of our work is to make sure that people understand that these aren't just important, but the law, and that violating these things is a violation of the law. So that's one of the reasons we started. And another big piece of it is helping people understand how we got where we are today and understand the history of this country and how groups of people, particularly people of color and others who are traditionally excluded from housing, how the systems and government actions over the course of generations resulted in whole classes and groups of people being excluded from housing opportunity and therefore not able to build generational wealth. And so we like to help people understand that history so that we can make change. And we're also very forward looking. So we don't want to just dwell on all the sins of the past, but we want to help everyone involved in housing figure out how to make systemic change and how we can do better and increase housing opportunity. And over the years, our work has taken a lot of different forms. At different points in our program's history, we've done testing and done more of the enforcement side of things. But what's remained constant through all this is that direct support for people experiencing discrimination, and our education initiatives, and also the spirit of collaboration and problem solving. So we focus on that basic housing education, and also on working with different groups and organizations and state agencies and grassroots groups to help increase awareness overall.
Okay, well, that's well said. I joined the business in 2014, and there was some required, continuing education classes that I took, and certainly references to it throughout licensure and some of that continuing ed. But what was really, and we've talked about this before on our previous Facebook Live, but what was so stunning to me was that report from Long Island a few years ago, and just how it plays out. I think a lot of us think about overt racism or prejudice as being the way that this happens, and it's such a more insidious and subtle process when it does happen, whether that's redlining or blockbusting or whatever it is. It's we work so hard in our business to be the trusted advisor on all matters in real estate, and so when we have that power and then we whisper something or we make an oblique reference to these folks are supposed to be here and you don't want to be over here because of this. I think for way too long, people in our industry have failed to understand the importance of not doing that, but also the weight that our words carry, because we think of ourselves as little businesses and little practitioners, but boy, are we at the tip of the spear for this stuff.
Oh, exactly. And I think you've touched on so many really important things there, because there's the notion of how we make decisions, and that bias is always part of our decision-making process, whether we understand it or not. And there's also the intent to do good. A lot of times people can make decisions, or you can try and guide your clients in a certain way because you think you're helping them, when in fact it could be steering them and not appropriate under fair housing law, and result in some of these really clear and tangible and impactful divisions in our communities.
Right. I mean, it can be, and I represent a home builder in South Burlington. It could be as simple as somebody asking the honest question: what kind of people live here? I'm an older person. Are there people like me here? Or we have kids. Are there people with kids here? And you've got to be really careful. I mean, and like we've talked about here, there can be a good reason for bringing that stuff up, but the way that we speak about it is so important and has these rippling and far-reaching effects.
Exactly. Yeah, we always, in our workshops and trainings, we always bring in best practices and talk about the ways that you can describe the home and describe the neighborhood, but not describe the type of people who one might think would fit in there. And that, I think that's where people get into trouble a lot. And yeah.
Right, and it's not necessary. And I'm prepared to field those questions, and I have good responses that are in line with fair housing. But if I've even been tripped up before, and I basically have a script for it. So imagine if you're not prepared, that even with the best intentions, you could say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And that's why education is so important here. You did touch a little bit on this already, but what are some other examples that maybe we haven't talked about of the work you do for the community and to raise awareness around these issues?
Yeah, let's see. So we talked about the trainings, and we're accredited through the State Association of Realtors. So real estate professionals can get continuing education credits for our trainings too. And we do more formal trainings, but we do a lot of more informal know your rights sessions, and also discussion sessions. I find one of the most fun and impactful things that we do is go into communities and have conversations about housing needs and housing issues, and talk to folks about what's going on in their communities, what's missing, who isn't able to live there, what type of housing isn't available, just to try and help folks start very local community discussions, because quite often change has to happen at a local level, and we work with housing committees, so local housing committees or housing commissions, who are often sometimes a subcommittee of the local planning commission, sometimes an ad hoc community group, but always a group of people who are looking to solve their community's housing challenges. And so working with them is really satisfying, because it's a way for people to make a direct impact on their community and potentially change local zoning or local laws that are making it more difficult for inclusive, affordable housing to be built. We do a lot of just general outreach, getting pamphlets and flyers out to different organizations and people to make sure that the information is in the hands of everyone who needs it. Conversations like this with different partners and organizations around the state are always great. Different workshops for Fair Housing Month. We like to get a little more creative. Before we started recording, you were talking about the different subcommittees of the Realtors Association, and how you're trying to think of different ways to get people engaged and connected. And we do the same thing with our fair housing work, where it's not all about waggling our finger and telling people what the law is. A lot of it is about helping people understand why diverse and inclusive communities are so important, and why that makes for stronger social structures, why that makes for more vibrant economies in our communities, and why we need a more inclusive housing. And so for Fair Housing Month, in addition to Fair Housing Fridays webinar discussions on really timely topics, like the need to do more than just build more housing, but to have the right types of housing in the right place with the right supported services. This Friday, the 22nd, the topic is on the challenges and opportunities of mobile home communities, and other sort of deeper discussions. We also have, for Fair Housing Month, some really fun creative projects, community art projects, exhibits and contests, opportunities for people to, kids and adults, people of all ages, to think about what home and what community means to them, and to express it through art. And so we've got a fun partnership with Arts So Wonderful, which is an arts-driven organization, and other arts groups, and a partnership with the Vermont Department of Libraries. And we just distributed almost 1,000 art kits all over the state, and we're seeing the pictures of things that are being created by kids and adults as they share their thoughts on home and community. And it's a really nice way to get people thinking about these concepts of fairness and equity and inclusion in a different way than a workshop or a flyer. And then we also have social media, Thriving Communities VT on Facebook and Instagram, and VT Fair Housing on Twitter, and then also a blog. So we like to connect with people and organizations in as many ways as possible.
Great. You all are busy over there.
We are, and I got to tell you, this is a statewide program. Our Fair Housing Project has 2 staff members.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, we all in our business are probably guilty at times of talking too much about how busy we are. And you all are doing very important work there. And I'm sure that there are times where it maybe feels a little thankless, but certainly it's appreciated by all of us in the industry. You mentioned Thriving Communities.
Mm-hmm.
What is Thriving Communities?
So, Thriving Communities is a statewide initiative that the Fair Housing Project coordinates, and it's a partnership of a bunch of different organizations, planning associations, and state agencies, with the goal to increase awareness about the importance of inclusive, affordable housing. And so the shared goal is that to help people understand that when communities are welcoming and when housing is available to a wide range of residents, people with assorted skills, assorted backgrounds, that makes for stronger communities. And so the Thriving Communities it's an initiative, but it's also the foundation of all of our other work. So we have a steering committee made up of members of these various organizations, and they provide guidance on statewide outreach initiatives, and we partner with all these organizations in our work. But what it really is Thriving Communities is really a philosophy and a mindset that guides all of our work, and that we encourage other organizations to follow as well, which is that for our communities to be strong and vibrant and to thrive, we need to have inclusive, affordable housing, and it has to be available. Everyone has to have equal opportunity to that housing, and we need to not just, follow fair housing law, but take steps to correct these historical inequities that have happened. So that's what that is.
Thank you. Well, no, it got me thinking that, so many of the public conversations around all of this, I think we get a little bit in the weeds politically, and people understandably kind of get their dukes up and get a little tribal. And I commend your organization for trying to take a nuanced approach and address these things at the root level. I think a lot of us in the business community, if we had a criticism for whether it was state or local government, it would be that we're picking a piece of fruit or a leaf off the plant rather than addressing the issues at the roots. And gosh, wouldn't it be better if we could do that? I guess easy for us to say in the private end of things. And the other thing that jumps up to me is the conversation around development, right? If someone's proposing to build, whether it's a nonprofit or a developer or whoever proposing to build some housing, one thing that always sticks with me is that you go to a planning meeting or a zoning meeting or whatever it is, and you hear people who are in favor and people who are opposed, and the people who are never there are the people who would be living in those homes. They're home with the kids, they're at their other job, they're wherever they are, they don't live in the community right now, so maybe they don't feel entitled to go to the meeting. And so I think, your organization does such important work as being a voice for people who would stand to benefit the most, but don't really have a seat at the table. Thank you.
Exactly, yeah, and because so many decisions in our communities are made by such a small group of people, and they're made based on policies and regulations that haven't really been critically examined in a long time. And so, the more that we can involve people in that public decision making, and the better. And that's why I think initiatives like the Thriving Communities Initiative, and then there's also a related group of called the Housing Communicators Group, which is made up of folks from different housing organizations around the state who are working on a public outreach campaign to help raise awareness about some of these things too. And it's so important because our homes dictate so much about our lives, and where we live affects where our kids go to school, how we can get to work, access to essential resources. And when whole groups of people don't have access to homes in certain places, then all of a sudden they don't have access to all these wonderful resources. And a lot of times, just talking to people about that and helping people, the people who are at the planning commission meeting yelling, no, 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 we can't build, we can't build that 6-unit building in my neighborhood. When they can kind of think it through and think about all the things that they value in their lives and that they're really important to them and their families, and realize that this 6-unit building is going to help give other people that same opportunity, there's some mindset shift, which is really, really important. Because you're right, a lot of times the people who will be most affected by new housing aren't part of those discussions. And we have solving Vermont's housing problem and shortage it's not easy. It's complex. It's not just about building more homes. It's about making sure that they're in the right place. It's about making sure that there are support services available for the most vulnerable residents who might be living there. It's making sure that financing is available. There's so many pieces to the puzzle, and there's a lot of really good work happening, but it's not happening fast enough.
No, and there are a lot of factors that collide. To make it difficult. And I'll say that as somebody who is involved in government affairs, state and local level, there's plenty of reasons for those of us who want to see more housing built to be worried and to have concern. But I'll also say that NIMBYism is always going to exist. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't want something to change next to them. It's human nature. It's understandable. But, I'm seeing, probably anecdotally, on the ground, more people in city and town offices who they may not see themselves as aligned with a developer. Okay, fair enough. But we can at least agree that more housing would be good. And I think that common ground doesn't solve all our problems, but it's at least a place to start.
Exactly. Yeah, and we've definitely over the past couple years, and especially through the pandemic, there's just a lot more attention to the role that housing plays, and willingness to talk about zoning and permitting, and it's really at the forefront of local and state conversations, which is really exciting. And there's a bunch of money being devoted to it as well.
Agreed. Yes, and that's an important piece. I represent a private developer who's developing the land that the family has owned since 1944, and making that a viable business it's not as easy as just ordering a bunch of materials and building a house. I mean, so to do it in an affordable manner it's a tall task.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How can realtors help get involved with CVOEO and FHP?
Oh, that's a great question. So there are ways to get involved, sort of indirectly. And so indirectly, just learning more about the history and how we got here today. Pledging to not just follow the law, but to seek out ways to really promote equity in housing. And getting involved with local housing committees and working at a local level, like we talked about before. Participating in events. So we have, for Fair Housing Month, we have a lot of events compacted into one month, but we also have all sorts of similar events and trainings throughout the year. For Fair Housing Month, you can go to fairhousingmonthvt.com cvoeo.org and check out the full schedule. And then you can learn more about us at cvoeo.org/FHP. Another way that real estate professionals can get involved is through financial support. We're a nonprofit organization. Our program is funded primarily through HUD. We get a HUD grant each year that pays for a portion of our work, but not all. And so we raise additional funds through donations and through sponsorships of Fair Housing Month and other events. And so wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say that's one way to get involved and support us, is to chip in some bucks. And then we also welcome partnerships. Like, we love to co-host events, to do things now that we're coming out of the pandemic, more in-person events. We'd love to partner with any and all housing groups.
Okay, well, I'll challenge our realtor members, because realtors generally are found to give more than the average American. And so, there are a lot of good causes out there, but this is certainly one that has immediate resonance with our business.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that we didn't cover? Anything that feels pressing? Anything our members should know? Anything we didn't cover today that we want to close with before I let you go, Jessica?
Let's see, we covered quite a bit. I guess, I think the two things that I'd like to leave you with is, to really think about the fact that, despite the fact that we have federal and state laws, discrimination still happens, and also despite good intentions all around, discrimination still happens more often than we realize, and this tight housing market really exacerbates that, and only a fraction of the instances ever get reported, and so it's just really important to just think about the really important role that real estate professionals have. I mean, you're helping people get into homes, and that's amazing and so important and so necessary, and there's a lot of power in that relationship too. And so to really to use that power for good, and to really think about the impact of this work, and to think creatively too, to think about ways that we can help make our communities even more welcoming and more inclusive. And I think there's a lot of good work going on in Vermont, and there are ideas that can come from other places too. Thinking about ways that we can increase access to safe and stable homes for everyone, and especially for people who have been traditionally excluded. People of color, families with kids, people with disabilities, LGBTQ folks, and others. That the more we can affirmatively further fair housing, the better, because everyone deserves a home. And I think we're in this really wonderful moment right now in Vermont, where there's a lot of money, a lot of attention, and a lot of energy going towards housing. And so we should just be really careful and intentional in our decisions, and make sure that everyone can have we can provide a solid foundation to everyone, so that everyone can benefit from safe and stable homes. So that's what I would say.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you, Jess Hyman, for your time today. We really appreciate it. It has been informative, to say the least. Thank you to our members for joining us today. Our next Face NVRA Live will take place Thursday, May 19th at 3 p.m. We'll get it working live, so you don't have to watch it after the fact next time. This is what happens when I'm left to do things on my own. You can stay updated on this and other NVRA happenings by following us on Facebook and Instagram. Jess, did you want to plug your organization's websites again before we let you go?
Oh, yes, please. So be sure to visit cvoeo.org/FHP to learn more about the Fair Housing Project, and check out all the rest of the Fair Housing Month events at fairhousingmonthvt.org. And thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate our conversation, and have a great rest of the day.
Same here. Thank you so much. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you. Bye.